Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the OT Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Erik Johnson, and I am super excited to have with me my guest finally, Katie Peterson. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. It's fun to be on the other side of the questions this time, but it is also sad because this is our last episode of this series.
Yeah, it's our last episode and bittersweet because so excited for you to move to this next chapter. You're going to be graduating, you're going to be done with everything, and you're going to be, taking your board, all the things. But I am so sad because I've really enjoyed this, and it's been such a just fun thing to do together. So that said, I want to kind of tear this apart a little bit. I want to break it down, and I want to kind of go back to the beginning from where we kind of conceptualize this, and then kind of how it played out. And we have all the episodes are out now. This is the last one. But tell me, I want to take back before we even started. When you first started thinking about this idea with the rehab arcade, I know a lot of it was kind of inspired by some of your history or past, your dad, things like that. But going into that first conversation with me, thinking about what would my capstone look like, what could it be, like what were your thoughts before we landed at podcast? Like I don't know that we've talked about that part.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I always just started like when I got to OT school and, we had the opportunity to start doing our research on something that was a passion of ours. I immediately found adaptive gaming as an intervention, as a way to engage clients in therapy, and as a very, very efficient modality. And I kind of just saw this as, what a great way to engage someone in therapy in a non-traditional way.
Yeah.
And, I just kept researching on, I did research on what population it was going to be most effective for, what are the barriers, all types of avenues when it came to adaptive gaming. And I really landed on actually Caitlin Jones's research on
Yeah.
like the barriers for the widespread adoption of adaptive video
Yeah.
gamings in occupational therapy. And
Yeah.
so that led me to kind of start having the conversations with my professors when it started
Yeah.
being time to talk about capstones. I had looked at all these different ways, but I just really wanted a way to continue to advocate and educate for using it in therapy.
Yeah.
And that was like my big thing is I just wanted to somehow take the knowledge that maybe so many people were overlooking or just not seeing the benefits of it and really get it out there in a way. And with today's society and everything, and us having that first initial conversation, we did land on the podcast because it's such an interactive and innovative way to spread that wealth of knowledge. And I also
Yeah.
thought after that conversation, practitioners are busy, therapists are busy, everybody has a busy lifestyle. So, throwing on a podcast when you are on the way to work, or throwing on a podcast when you're going on a walk after work, just it's
Yeah.
an easy way to get that knowledge out there. So,
Yeah.
when we landed on, let's make this podcast series, I was so excited because I was
Yeah.
nervous, but I was excited because I
Yeah.
didn't know how I'd feel about being a face of a podcast series, but
Well, what's crazy is that when we were throwing around ideas, and your capstone stone coordinator was in on that conversation with us, and we were just throwing around ideas like these are some of the things, and then we like, oh, what would be really cool is like a podcast. And as soon as we said it, all three of us were like, yes,
yes.
let's do that. Like that would be so cool and different. Like
Mhm.
nobody's doing that. Like uh, zero people have done a capstone on podcasting in OT. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine a full capstone dedicated to podcasting.
Yeah, that's what I was just recently talking to my faculty mentor, Dr. Abby Lemon, about that. And she was like, this is just such a cool experience
Yeah,
to see unfold. And it's been such a cool experience to be involved in and to have this kind of untraditional approach to,
Yeah.
knowledge translation and advocacy in occupational therapy.
Yeah.
Super cool.
I was just, I follow a lot of different Instagram accounts, OT mostly. And one of them was talking about knowledge translation. He was kind of mentioning, we do a lot of kind of focus on these spaces, but we're really lacking in these spaces. And I remember thinking, it's like, can I talk to you about that? Like formally, would you come on the podcast so we can kind of tear that down a bit and even look at what OT education looks like, because I think it's an opportunity. Like students learn differently.
Yeah.
We learn differently.
Hmm.
I mean, when I was in OT school in the early 2000s, it was books and, like nobody really, it didn't feel like there was, uh, it didn't feel like people asked questions like they do now. It
Hmm.
didn't feel like people pushed back like they do now, in a good way. I think pushing back right now is a good thing. We are kind of stuck in a space that says like, we've been learning all these models and theories and practice and all these things, but you know, some of the practical application things are really kind of missing us,
Hmm.
like, and that could be a systems problem or whatever, but we also have to realize like, well, now, we're learning differently, so like we have to evolve with how we learn. And so having the podcast was like, ooh, this is really cool because I could learn in a very different way. Like arguably, if you listen to our series of this podcast, you would have so much more knowledge than any of your peers about what's out there, the potential. You would see things with your eyes. You would learn things that you wouldn't learn in OT school. And I mean, this should be for all of OT. What's crazy too is I was inspired by this podcast by two of my OT students, Karen Zinsmeister and Leighton Mosley, and they did a podcast. I'm trying to think. I forget what it was called, but they did a podcast during OT school, and they went through the whole OTPF. They did a whole series on the OTPF, and I remember listening to their podcast and being like, "That is actually really good," like, and they broke it down to the point where I was like, "This is like significant, important," and inspired from you. I have now created an assignment for my students to make their own podcast based off of models, theories, frames, horizon, practice, because those are some things that are like good to know, but maybe a little bit tricky to wield,
Right.
So it was cool to kind of see how you created this thing. So speaking of creating, we decided on the podcast and you kind of took it from there. One of the things that I had kind of said, I want you to feel this whole thing.
Hmm.
I want you to record it. I want you to edit it. I want you to write the notes about it. I want you to, brainstorm about what it could be. Like all these things were on you. I'm your mentor and I'm helping you guide through the system, but these were all your doings. So like even posting on Spotify, you're posting the podcast there. So tell me about that process. What did that look like for you, kind of going into that and thinking like, because also if we're thinking about it, it's like, okay, it's just a podcast, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Is this capstone doctoral worthy, And so we wanted to make sure that it was.
Right.
So talk me through what your impression of making that significant and worthy looks
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, that was, I definitely like when we did land on doing a podcast, it was definitely a little bit daunting knowing all of the components that go into it because there is a lot more than just what you see. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that you have to do, like the scripts that we make. And the scripts are just, generalized questions, but I have to be educated on the actual
Yeah.
answers. Like I can't just, pull something out of thin air because that's what I think it is.
Yeah.
I have to go in and really analyze the literature and see what's actually working out there. We did do our one episode on really the analysis of just that one episode, but every single episode there is research behind it. There's things
Yeah.
that are backing it up. Um, and a lot of it, we wanted to translate some of the findings that were already on the Rehab Arcade in a little bit of a more interactive series. So we pulled from the Rehab Arcade and all of the literature that's already on there a bit too, and making the scripts. And it has just been a big process of trying to learn and me learning along the way as well. I'm learning
Yeah.
all of these amazing new things that are out there, the new and exciting, how the evolution of everything has shifted over the years. But the scripts, those took a pretty decent amount of time, but they were very beneficial for my knowledge and being able to effectively communicate that to our listeners.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the editing aspect of it is a little bit scary, but there's so many great tutorials out there on how you can make a podcast, and there's so many amazing software stuff out there now that
Yeah.
it really just took a little bit of trial and error and trying to figure out and fidget with things every week. But it really became just one of those things that was just really fun, and I got excited to post every single week
Yeah.
because our views, like we were getting on average probably about right currently around 100 views on
Yeah.
YouTube and 40 or 50 through Spotify and the other streaming
Yeah.
platforms for each of us. But we're hoping that just continues to grow, and this can be just a place that holds that
Yeah.
information. And
Yeah.
when therapists have those questions, it's like, all right, how do I need to learn some more about mounts and splints and positioning. All right, well, let
Yeah.
me do a quick Google search. We want our video to be up there. And it's like, oh, I can listen to this on the way to work, and then I can do
Yeah.
a deeper dive when I get home.
Yeah.
So I just really wanted it to be a space that therapists or even just any type of practitioner that needed to know a little bit more could just quickly listen. And I loved that it was just that casual conversation between an expert and a student. I think that was a really great like perspective. And like you were talking about in school, like the way that everybody learns. For me, for instance, I love to just chat with my classmates or chat with my
Yeah.
professors and learn about their
Yeah.
experiences and talking about all the different things and how their experience has differed from mine, or how, whatever they did in a session versus what I did in a session. It's like, all right, well, now I can pull from what they did. So by
Yeah.
providing that real world experience combined with, the evidence and the clinical
Yeah.
application that we had, we really created this podcast that could be very, very valuable to those who are listening. So
Yeah.
it's super cool.
Yeah, it was really neat, and I love how it unfolded, because it started to get easier, and we started to have this flow where kind of we understood kind of where somebody was going with something, and then kind of how to move in and out of certain things. But it's interesting because you did talk about kind of prepping and kind of getting ready for things, and one of the things that I do for those out there that are wanting to, like entrepreneurs or people that are looking to do something like non-traditional like this, one of the things that you get stuck on so often is starting. Like, well, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be here, it's got to be like this before I hit the go button. But if I can give you any advice, it's hit the go button
Mhm.
and then fail a few times, make a couple mistakes, things like that in order to do it. Katie actually went and did a lot of research on what is the best way to edit podcasts. And so she looked at some stuff. So we got a subscription to a podcast service. Then she was able to kind of do most of the stuff through there. We did a lot of our thumbnails, and we did our pictures and stuff through Canvas that we shared, and she was able to kind of manipulate our pictures, get PNG files, transparents, and then put them on something attractive and visually kind of stimulating that would pull people in. And even some of the small things like buying a microphone, like what is the microphone that I buy,
Yeah.
and how do I do lighting correctly, and where do I set the camera up, all these things kind of come into mix. But we didn't waste a lot of time. I think I gave you like homework and it's like, all right, we need to have these episodes like locked in, and then we're going to start recording on these dates, and I think that, being able to kind of give you a timeline and then us executing in a dedicated space each week it was really kind of the recipe for success in this. So and really, I also just want to say to you that not everybody could do this. You're very unique. You held yourself so well. You're a great host. I was so impressed by your preparation, and I'm again so thankful to have had you as the person on the other side taking over, because I was nervous.
Yeah.
I was nervous, like this could go poorly because I don't know. It's not like I auditioned people as a host for a podcast. It
Right.
was I saw somebody's dream and I thought maybe dream for a capstone in gaming, maybe this would be a good fit, and you are a great fit. And in hindsight, would probably never do that again. Not really screening, like, I don't know that your podcast material,
Right.
but luckily it worked out really well. So first of all, thank you for taking a risk on this. I think it really serves the greater OT population. I think it's great for Old Dominion, and you guys are the initial first cohort, right?
Yeah.
Inaugural.
Yeah.
What a great way to say, hey, look, we do something awesome. We do things that are outside of the box. We're learning differently than other people. So props to Old Dominion, and taking a risk. And I love that, like, this whole podcast series will exist in its own space on the Rehab Arcade. If you go to resources and you'll look at media, boom, it has the Rehab Arcade Student Takeover. The whole series is there, and you can watch them. One to, I think we have 14, 15 episodes,
Yeah.
right? And there's some other stuff there, but I love that it's going to live there. I love that your project will live there, and it's such an honor to be able to have that. So thank you for being such a wonderful student and just doing this.
Absolutely. And thank you for being such a great mentor and really helping me just, push myself and educate myself and trying to be a little student expert on adaptive gaming. It's been an awesome journey, and I'm sad that it's coming to an end for sure.
Yeah,
And, every single week we would have these amazing discussions, and that would, translate into another idea for a podcast. And we could keep going and going and going.
we
But,
could. Oh my gosh, I have
it's
so many ideas. So maybe I'll have you back as a guest on the OT Unleashed podcast
yeah.
later on and see where you're at. We'll do like a student catch up, like where did where are you now? So,
Right.
um, well, everybody, again, Katie Peterson, from Old Dominion University. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And thank you guys for listening to this series. We're sad that's coming to an end, but we're excited that we have a really cool completed project. So join us in the future. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up for the OT Unleashed podcast. We'll be talking about some education things. I'm going to try to get some celebrities on here, actually. So that'll be fun. The more listeners, the more views that we have, the better options we have for that. So we will see you guys next week. And Katie, thanks once again for everything.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for always listening and interacting with our series throughout this journey. So,
All right. See you guys later.
bye.